Join us now for Education Matters, a weekly look at the real people and real stories in education across North Carolina.
Welcome to another episode of Education Matters presented by the Public School Forum of North Carolina. I'm your host, Keith Poston. A North Carolina teacher is the subject of a new documentary film called Teacher of the Year. That teacher will join us today along with the filmmakers and a professor from Wake Forest who has studied how teachers are portrayed by Hollywood. Like every week before we tackle the main topic, we open with our segment we call EdLines, a quick scan of education headlines across North Carolina and the U.S. The lawsuit filed by the State Board of Education over House Bill 17 now has a court date. On June 29th, a three-judge panel will hear arguments over the controversial bill passed in a special session in December that stripped powers from the State Board and gave them to newly elected Republican State Superintendent Mark Johnson. Superintendent Johnson, who has praised the legislation, has formally joined the case in support of the bill. In the meantime, implementation of HB 17 has been stayed until the case is heard this summer. The day the music died. That's how one superintendent we spoke to described new class size guidelines that were included in last year's budget passed by the General Assembly. The new law sets smaller class sizes for grades K through 3, but does not fund new positions or classroom space. So many school systems across North Carolina are warning it may force cuts in music, arts, and PE next year to comply with the guidance. Legislation has been introduced in the House to address what Representative Craig Horn, the K-12 Education Committee chair, called an unintended consequence. It's unclear if the North Carolina Senate feels that way. Who will run the new Achievement School District slated to take over 5 low-performing elementary schools this fall is still up in the air. The State Board of Education set up a search committee to find a leader for the effort, and reportedly more than 50 applicants came forward. But weeks after promising a recommendation last year, there appears now to be no set timeline or even a process to select one, given the recent HB 17 legislation and the lawsuits over it. We will keep you posted. Finally, another national report is out about discipline disparity in our public schools when it comes to students of color. The study by Education Week found that black students are arrested at school at disproportionately high levels. For example, here in North Carolina, black students make up 26% of the student population, but account for 43% of all arrests. Researchers point to discipline disparity along racial lines as part of a troubling school-to-prison pipeline, particularly for black male students who are much more likely to be suspended or worse for the same offenses as white students. Remember, you can visit the Public School Forum's website at ncforum.org, click Education Matters, and read more about each of these EdLines as well as all the other topics we cover each week.